Good morning, Team America and fellow Americans. This is to all of us. One more. Today's show is a special show by request. And if you're completely done with the whole moon landing thing, you might as well just shut me off, because we're talking about the moon landing conspiracy, which is no longer a conspiracy because NASA never went to the moon. And I'm going to explain it one more time for some people out there that are very feeble and don't want to admit that it was rigged, it was faked. So I'm going to go over it step by step and let you make your own judge out of just common sense. This is just common sense stuff. So if you don't want to hear it, turn me off. If you want to listen to it and listen to my coffee percolate, there you go. Okay, so here we go. We need three things to get to the moon: thrust, oxygen, and power. Power. And everyone's going to tell you the same thing. Now, we also need, there's a fourth thing we need, and that's the ability to protect ourselves from radiation. I was going to get into the Van Allen belts because apparently there's people that believe that you can deflect radiation with paper-sized, paper-thin aluminum foil. No, you cannot. And I don't even want to go into the number 4 because there's no way anybody can dispel that. And I live in Houston, and I've been to NASA, and I've tried to get people to explain that to me, and no. Okay, so, and radiation moves in every direction. It doesn't just move in one direction. So it's bullshit that they're telling you, well, the space capsule has a heat shield, and that's made out of special material. Whatever. Bullshit. Okay, so we're going to stick to the thrust, the oxygen, and the power. Those are the three things you need to get to the moon. All right, so in the 1960s, they created the Atlas rocket, okay? These things were humongous. I don't even know how tall they were, maybe 30 stories high, long. And these things took off, and they had stages to it. Each stage was fueled with solid rocket fuel. Now, solid rocket fuel means is that it's almost like a powder, a fine powder. And once it's ignited, they can't shut it off for no reason. You can't throttle up or throttle down. You're stuck at whatever thrust this thing's launching. So the Atlas rocket would take off and, go up into space, or, beautiful sight. A lot of power, flames coming out of it. It's going to space, parts of it falling off and going on, and goes into space. And the idea was that these rockets would reach the speed of a bullet, maybe a little bit faster than the speed of a bullet, when it went into orbit. And see, they would use that speed to capture the gravity of the Earth, use it like a slingshot, and then head right to the moon. But see, before they could do that, right there, it sounds pretty sound, doesn't it? Speed of a bullet to the moon. No, see, when they finally got into orbit, they had to do a very dangerous maneuver. One part of the ship would come apart while traveling at the speed of a bullet, would come out, turn around, and thrust back to pick up the lunar lander. And then the ship would do another roundabout, and it hit full thrust, and then take off to the moon. Now that is an incredible feat. But if you know anything about being in a Earth gravity, I don't need to lean up against this wall and push to move. But in space, you do. You have to have something to push yourself away from. That's why the astronauts use these jetpacks, and they use these little things there that goes, psh, and those things move them, right? Well, that little psh only gives you so much speed. The thrust that they have on the lunar lander and the module, space module, would only create so much thrust. So not the speed of a bullet, because once the thrust is out, that's it, you're done. And that's why you ever see, if you watch Apollo 13, when they're trying to correct their course in space, they were trying to thrust themselves into position. That's another story entirely. But in order for the lunar lander, okay, which is now in front of the space module, as they're heading to the moon, they had to increase their speed back to the speed of a bullet. And how did they do that? Well, apparently the module had a thruster in the end. No. See, I just told you. Even if the module had a nozzle the size of Alaska, the little psh that came out of it would only reach a certain speed, and not the speed of a bullet. So, number one, you need speed. They didn't have it. So there's no way they got there in 5 days and came back. We'll talk about very briefly the belt of radiation called the Van Allen belts. I want you to think about this. Earth is here, and around it is this giant invisible egg of radiation called the Van Allen belts. It's solar radiation, it's space radiation, it's all these radiations just swirling around the world, and the only reason we're protected is because we have a magnetic field. And while the Earth is turning, it creates gravity, keeps us on the ground. Remember that. Earth spins, we're keeping on the ground. Earth stops spinning, we start flying in every direction you can possibly think of. Probably headed to the west, I think. Anyway, not important. So these two ships are now carrying oxygen, fuel, and power to go to the moon. It's almost, I think it was a 7-8 day trip. So they're going through the Van Allen belts. They're not dying. I'm going to give you that one. That you believe radiation can be blocked by aluminum foil. So they're traveling through space, and they get to the moon, and then the lunar lander detaches from the lunar ship, right? And this lunar lander lands on the moon. Now, I want you to think about this. While they're on the moon, they have to send a signal to Earth via radio, to Earth, to the lunar ship. That ship sends a broadcast signal to Houston, where they're all patiently waiting for the things to come in. There's only they claimed there was only like a 3 second, maybe a 2 second variation, a little pause, but no, it would have been longer than that. Would have been way longer than that. The ships were proving that they couldn't communicate between the launch pad and the launch tower. So they were having problems with that. Anyway, I digress. I'm trying to speed up because we're running out of time. So when this happened, I want you to think of car batteries. How long does the car battery last on your car if the belt goes out on your alternator? Not very long. Not very long at all. The lunar lander had to send a powerful video message from them to the orbiting station, to the Earth, and live broadcast. People today, one of those giant antennas on the outside of Houston has to have a tremendous energy power source just to send a transmission today. Tremendous power to send a transmission, only 90-mile radius. And these ass clowns are claiming they send a message 225, almost 300,000 miles through space to Earth. And a live transmission. Okay, now you gotta remember, this lunar lander here had 5 batteries on it. Each battery was half the size of a car battery. That's not enough power to send a transmission. The orbiting capsule, whatever they call it, okay, with the lunar lander, even with that in charge, okay, this had 9 batteries, half the size of a car battery. These things also had to run air conditioning units. They had to run all kinds of computer systems, lights, and all kinds of shit, heaters to keep them warm. No way. There's not enough power for them to do that, and there's nowhere for them to plug in and recharge. So tell me, how did they get to the moon? They didn't. There wasn't enough oxygen, and there wasn't enough protection from radiation. They didn't have the thrust, and then they had to leave the moon using thrust. Think about that. Now, on the moon, they could hop around, right? They're hopping around, 4 or 5 inches off the ground, okay? And there's no gravity on the moon. The moon does not rotate like the Earth. So they're trying to say that mass creates gravity. Well, I'll go with that. And they're saying that Earth kind of gives the moon its own gravity so that when the astronauts were there, they were being assisted by Earth gravity. Okay, if that's the case, then why is it we have these huge satellites floating around the United States and all the astronauts are bouncing around going, yes, I'm on the space station, and all their hair standing up and shit? Think about it. Just think about it. So they didn't go to the moon. I could have gone deeper into this, but I don't have to. Team America, be smarter than that. By the way, Hunter Biden's going to fucking jail, and so is Joe Biden, because they need to. And they made paperwork disappear because they're trying to cover it up with the press. Let's arrest them fuckers. God bless you. I love you. Hit like down on the video, please. I love you. I'll talk to you later. Team America signing off.